Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you very much for having me here. We're nearing the end of this wonderful conference, and I've listened to so many very inspiring stories. I heard hard data and evidence, and I've seen and I've listened to moving stories, people sharing their own experiences or experiences of other people. And I don't want to draw conclusions, but I want to do one thing. How can we translate all these beautiful stories and our experience into action? In other words, how can we scale up? And there I think we all have how to play our individual roles from our own perspective. My perspective, my background is I'm a government official, and I think I'm the only government official in this line of speakers. So I want to share with you my story as a diplomat. Many people think that diplomats only work behind closed doors or behind the scenes. Or they think about what Churchill once said, diplomats tell you to go to hell while at the same time making you ask for directions. I want to challenge that picture. I think diplomats and government officials in general should be transparent about where they are, what is their opinion and what they stand for. They need to mention what needs to be mentioned. That means including having discussions, open discussions about the controversial issues, access to safe abortion, access for young people to services, to education, LGBT position within the broader definition of sexual rights. That's a story I want to share with you, and let me see where is my added value. And I want to focus on two words, integration and linking. The new Agenda 2030 directs us even more towards big picture thinking. We need to broaden SRHR. And yes, we have those beautiful SDG 3, SDG 5, but we also need to make sure that SRHR and the discussion on women's rights is completely embedded in all the SDGs. And if you look at the more specific SDG 5 or SDG 3, which in themselves are well defined, but they are much more modest than, for instance, the ICPD agenda, which we have seen, which we have all agreed upon in 1994. And the ICPD agenda within my government, within my ministry, is very modest compared to what we stand for as a government. I really have to defend my work every day and again within my ministry, where we think that other issues such as climate change are more important. So for me, the challenge is to make sure that we integrate SRHR in the wider sector of sustainability, humanitarian action. Think about the World Humanitarian Summit, which will take place in a few days from now, and human rights. And finally, maybe even more important, we need to make sure that we embed our discussions on SRHR and women's rights in the world of those people who take decisions about budgets, finance ministers. Once the Vice Minister of Finance in Egypt told me, he used to be a Minister of Health before, he told me, you guys, speaking about women's rights or about health issues, you speak in terms of slogans, leave no one behind. He said, as a Minister of Finance, I know what you need. You need to convince me using hard data, which show that your activities and your agenda contribute to economic development in my country. Then I will make money available. And I found it a wise advice. Two examples of integrated programming. A well-known example, the relation between HIV and SRHR. Some of us work here on HIV/AIDS response, but too many and too often I see different organizations working on the HIV/AIDS response on the one hand and SRHR on the other hand. Whereas if I speak in my work to sex workers or drug users who say, I get good access to treatment, I get medicines, etc. But how can I get access to family planning services, or how can I get access to safe abortion services? Often we overlook the family or the SRHR needs and rights of people facing HIV. The second example, and it was mentioned a couple of times in this conference, is menstrual hygiene management. It's so obvious. At the same time, it took us so much time to bring together the world of SRHR on the one hand and the world of water supply and sanitation on the other hand. There will be actually, after the closing ceremony, a side event on that issue. The second term I want to use is linkages. We strongly believe in multi-partnership, multi-stakeholder partnerships. Especially with CSOs. My government embarked upon a quite ambitious program where we tried to change our traditional donor-recipient relation towards a relation where we work as partners together, which means that we want to use the networks, the huge networks of some international NGOs, which are actually sometimes much bigger than we as a government have. And then the other way around, we would allow and we would invite NGOs, civil society organizations to help us formulate our policies and be a partner in the same agenda. When you work on SRHR, in the Dutch case, our agenda is almost similar as a government as the agenda of the NGOs working on SRHR. So the question is not how can we discuss with each other that agenda, no, how can we play how can we have an added value from our playing our different roles. Public-private partnerships, not new, but I think we're still working on how we can optimally use public-private partnerships, which has taught us a lot. For instance, on innovative financing. Social impact bonds, I very much believe in that. A third example is partnerships with the academic world, often overlooked. But we need, as a government, we need people who hold us accountable on the long-term trends, and who help us in identifying and using data and evidence. A completely different linkage, which for us as diplomats I think is very important, is the linkage between what we are doing in New York, in Geneva, and Brussels, on the one hand, negotiating a UN language. On the one hand, how does it relate to that 40-year-old girl in Malawi on the other hand? And it's really a huge challenge. And sometimes it's a bit frustrating to see that those people in New York really don't know what SRHR stands for. And the rights and the needs of that 40-year-old girl sometimes are completely forgotten, since then we are negotiating SRHR as it was like trade negotiations about bananas or pineapples. It's not the same. We're talking about human rights here, and I think as diplomats we need to show that in New York. And fortunately, sometimes there are people who are willing and brave enough, young people, to go to the scene and to go to the platform in New York and Geneva and share their stories. One more linkage is the linkage with individual citizens. You may be aware that in most Western European countries we are facing a silent crisis in ODA. ODA resources are going down. In my case, the Dutch case, 30% of ODA funding goes to hosting refugees. The scarce resources which are available need to be accounted for to our taxpayers, and please help us in doing that. So I come to the conclusion, we need to scale up. If you want SRHR to be implemented, think about the 225 million women who express they have an unmet need. We want to encourage big picture thinking. That means leaving behind our silos. It means going beyond your comfort zone. It means connect with other sectors. It means not only sending messages, but also listening to others. It means include in your networks the non-aligned, include the not like-minded, include those people with whom you traditionally, as governments, would not work, such as religious groups, faith-based organizations. And finally, link with CSOs, private sector, the academic world, and link different levels. And maybe one last word, Michel, to conclude. Link with men. It's good to see that in this conference there are relatively many men available and present. But at the same time, we all know in our work, in my own country, in my own ministry, wherever I come, women's rights or SRHR is dominated by women. And I think we need men to deliver as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.